Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining into the podcast today. I have a very exciting guest today joining us. Her name is Helen Ridley, and Helen is a live illustrator, a watercolor artist. She illustrates at the weddings and hosts workshops, and she has a really wide-ranging practice. And I think it's going to be super fun talking to you, Helen. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about how you got started and your favorite art mediums. I think I know a little bit already, but I'm really looking forward to talking to you. So would you mind introducing yourself a little bit more for us?
Yeah, so my name's Helen. I'm Helen Ridley Illustration on social media, and my website is helenridley.com. So I work as a live illustrator or live portrait artist at weddings and live events. And I'm also a watercolour artist and teach watercolour workshops at a range of venues local to where I'm based or further afield. So I'm based in Reading in Berkshire, and I teach workshops in London and Bristol and the surrounding areas of Reading as well. So those are the two main core parts of my business. I also do custom portraits for tied into weddings, so either bridal portraits, but also family and pet portraits. I've also recently started doing live pet portraits, which has been really fun. So I can do a portrait of a person or a pet in about 5 to 10 minutes, basically. And I love working fast. I love working in a relaxed way, and that's the way I teach in my workshops as well. Is loosening up with particularly watercolours, but also a range of materials that I introduce in different workshops depending on what they are. And my background is actually I did a degree in fashion design. I always enjoyed the illustration aspect of that. So I didn't work in illustration off the back of my degree straight away. I started working briefly in the fashion industry, but didn't enjoy it so much. So I segued into working in product development as a product technologist in retailers for about 10 years or so. So I worked with lots of different UK retailers in their head office developing products. But then lockdown came along, and as I'm sure with a lot of people, it gave me a chance to review what I wanted to do, and I decided to start building up my illustration portfolio again. It was something I'd done on and off over the years whilst working in a day job, but lockdown gave me the chance to get it started. I took some short courses online, and then I started selling my products online on Etsy and my website. And then once the world started opening up again, I was like, the illustration I want to do is with real people. I want to do live events. I want to teach workshops. I want that interaction. Being purely online, I felt a bit frustrated by that. So that's the way that I've moved my business, is to be an illustrator, but also have that real life interaction with people.
Wow. Well, I think that's lots of information already. I have immediately lots of questions for you, and I'm sure people listening also have lots of questions for you. But we're also going to do a bit of sketching today, so I'm going to quickly turn my camera around. So that's what I like to do is go so people can see my sketchbook. And so I'm going to do a bit of sketching whilst we chat. And we're going to dive into all of these things that you just told us and find out a bit more about you. Are you going to do a bit of sketching as well today?
Yeah, I'm going to do some sketching of some plants on shelves because I'm teaching a workshop soon on how to illustrate your own plant shelfie. So I love drawing plants and florals. Those are two of my favourite subjects I teach. So I'm going to do some of that today.
Fantastic. So I'm just setting this up. I have a little bit of an inspiration photo. I have some paints and some crayons and some other things here. So I'm just slowly going to get started with my sort of initial sketch. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. When you were a child, did you really like drawing and painting back then? Or is this something that you
I always loved it. When I was at school, I was always taking the art classes at GCSE and A-level, and I did a textiles as well, which was what led me into the fashion side of things later on. I loved sewing, I loved painting, making things with my hands in general. I love doing. So yeah, I've always had the bug for it, and I couldn't ever imagine not having done a creative career in some respects. So it was a little bit frustrating to not find a way of making money as a creative initially when I first left university. But because I've come to being a full-time illustrator later on, I feel like all the experience I've had of working in a more 9-to-5 job, corporate job, it's given me all the experience I need to set up a business and the confidence to do that. I may not have had that confidence when I was younger.
I think the whole sort of online teaching and the online sort of environment is something that a lot of people didn't realize before COVID. I think. Yeah, this is something that I definitely know that happened within myself as well.
Yeah, it's lovely to mean that you can connect with people all over the world, and it gives also illustrators and artists the flexibility of not being restricted by the venues that they're teaching in. It's fantastic that there's that option to teach online.
And what is it that because I know you work a lot in watercolors and ink and really loose. What is it that that sort of attracted you to use those materials?
I guess I'm a little bit impatient with sketching. I find that I don't have the patience for going into tons and tons of detail in a painting. And so that's why watercolour appealed to me. I know that some people do use watercolour in a very precise, detailed way, and it can also be used for that. But I love the spontaneity of it, the fact that you don't always know exactly what's going to happen when you're working with it, but every painting will look different. I use it predominantly when I'm doing my live portraits at events, and it means I can mix colours very quickly. I can add the detail with a pen initially, and then just add quick washes of colour using watercolour, and it's just super fast and quick and vibrant and really fun. So yeah, I love that, and I also anything that I can just pick up and start sketching with, so like coloured pencils or like pastels, and like pen and ink just generally, or just a fine liner pen. Because I also like to sketch out and about when I'm visiting galleries or going on holiday or visiting interesting places to sketch. So I like being able to just grab a few things and take them with me and then sketch on the go.
I find that people are often a bit surprised that it is okay to be really loose and messy. I think a lot of people who are new to art, they find that, or they sort of have this idea that all art needs to be like this hyper realism, very detailed. Like what you sort of aim for when you're a child, when you're learning to draw, you want to copy a picture and it needs to look like that.
Yeah.
Do you find this as well? That sometimes it surprises people.
Yeah, I think that's
to be
when I teach
messy?
workshops with my students. I think they get frustrated that it doesn't look the way they're expecting it to, or they're wanting it to look exactly like what they're looking at. But I think it's sort of letting go of that is part of the joy of creating art. And I do appreciate there's some incredibly talented artists out there that do make very hyper realistic art, but I think there's a lot more freedom in just kind of being spontaneous with what you're creating and letting the materials guide you, and just losing yourself in the moment. Because I think if you're so worried about what it's looking like, you're not going to enjoy the process. And also, that's what photographs are for. If you want it to look exactly like what you're looking at, then photographs are there for that. But the joy of painting and drawing is that it becomes your own interpretation of something.
I totally agree, and I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with creating something realistic. If that's when you enjoy it, go for it. But I think a lot of people like exploring something a little bit new, or they actually they find that once they loosen up a little bit, that is actually really joyful and really fun, and it's okay to let that inner child out and be a little bit messy.
Well, it's that whole famously Picasso was incredibly talented as a traditional artist when he started out. I think apparently to the point that his own father, who was an art teacher, gave up his job because his son was so good.
Yeah,
he was And so he was, doing much more traditional paintings initially, but he got frustrated with that. He found it really restrictive. And that's what led him to explore cubism, which was about layering all the different angles of something on top of each other. And he found that super liberating. And I think, and that's one of my favourite art movements is the Impressionists. I'm obsessed with Cézanne and Degas and Monet and Manet. And I went to the Impressionists on Paper exhibition at the Royal Academy a few days ago, or last week, and it was incredible. And it was a really sort of serendipitous weekend. I saw that on the Saturday and saw Degas' painting of dancers. He painted these beautiful drawings of ballerinas in the studios using really minimal mark making and pastels. And the following day, I actually did a life drawing class of a dancer that was moving whilst we were drawing them. And that was really liberating you just could not follow exactly what they looked like. You had to kind of go with how it felt almost, rather than doing an exact representation, because it was all moving too quickly. And that was really fun.
It sounds amazing. That sounds really fun. I should go to that exhibition. I think I love going to museums and look at people's art, and I often take a sketchbook with me, but I don't always use it. But I always carry some art materials with me just in case I want to use them. Do you like this as well?
Yeah, I think the sketchbook I have here is from when I went. There was the Cézanne exhibition at the Tate Modern last year, and I absolutely adored it. It was. I don't think I'd fully appreciated what Cézanne's work was like before I saw it in one place, because I think you sort of, most people are familiar with his paintings of apples and oranges and still lives, but he was extremely obsessed with landscapes, and apparently had almost a love affair with a mountain that he wanted to paint over and over and over again in lots of different lights. And there was again, I loved seeing, there were examples of his sketchbook work, so his like watercolour paintings, which most people don't get to see. And there are a few of those in the exhibition I went to at the Royal Academy. And that's what I love seeing, is like an artist working out in their sketchbook, and like sort of rough and spontaneous paintings that they're doing and sketches. And so he would just kind of pack everything on his back, including a seat and an easel, and just hike up into the mountains and paint that way. And that I found really inspiring as well.
Yeah, I've tried to go out and about and sketch out and about as much as I can, but we're a little bit beholden to the English weather.
It's not so much. It's not so easy at this time of year. But that's why going to galleries is good, because at least you're undercover.
But also sometimes it's quite nice when it starts raining, and if you make a really quick sketch and you have these sort of water drops on your painting, and that's why sort of the techniques of line and wash, or when you that's okay to be a little bit messy, because then you're not being shaped by the environment.
And embracing, making that water drop on your ink painting can make it even more interesting. Perhaps we're kind of embracing what happens with it.
So we were talking earlier, so we had a little bit of a conversation before we started the recording, and we were talking about sort of branding yourself and putting yourself out there in the world, and having photos taken, and showing your work to the world. And how did you find doing that? Was that quite an easy process for you to lean into sharing your art with the world?
Yeah, I think it's something I've become more and more comfortable with. I think ultimately I'm not an amazing photographer myself, and I just have a lot. I think perhaps working as a live illustrator and working in the wedding industry, I've met a lot of photographers. I've seen how they work, and I've had a couple of branding photo shoots now for my own business. I'm working with photographers, and it's really made me appreciate the talent that goes into photography, whether that's just taking the photo on the day, but also the editing that goes into it as well. And once I've had these photo shoots done, it just gives me an amazing selection of content for my business to use on my website, to use if I'm pitching for press, to use on social media. it just makes all those decisions so much easier, and you feel so much more professional because you're like, well, I have a very nicely styled profile photo of me, or I have a photo of me at work in my studio or teaching a workshop, and it just helps communicate what you do so much more easily. But yeah, I think they are a bit of an investment, and I appreciate if you're just starting out as an illustrator or a creative, it's a little bit of money to invest. But honestly, like the amount I've used all that content that I've taken from those photo shoots has been huge, and you just feel it really makes you feel prepared and organised and professional as a creative, having those resources.
How is
really recommend it. Sure.
Yeah. How is it for you to have people watch you whilst you're drawing live? Are you ever scared to make mistakes? Like,
I would say it takes sort of. Obviously I'm comfortable with it because it is a big part of what I do. But it's not to say that straight off the bat I'm super relaxed about it. It takes me a couple of drawings to kind of get in the zone, I would say. I wouldn't say the first drawings I make are my best ones. But I'm there normally for like 2, 4, 6 hours. And once you're in the zone, once you've got chatting to people, once you've relaxed into it, and once you sort of loosen up, because if you're tense and worried, then your drawings will look tense and perhaps worried. But if you just relax into the process, then your drawings look better. So yeah, it just takes a bit of time, but you just at the same time you've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone at the end of the day, and just accept that you will be a bit uncomfortable initially, but it will get easier.
Do you remember the first time you had a live event?
Yeah, well, I think I did it as a bit of a spontaneous thing at a like an art fair last year, I think it was. I just was exhibiting at an art fair, which was one of those arts trails where people open their houses and you can go in and you can look at people's artwork. And it was luckily a beautiful summer's weekend, so we were out in the garden, and I set up a table and chair in the garden and had a little easel and just put up a sign saying you can have me paint your portrait. So people were posing with head and shoulders portraits I was doing at that time because it was quicker. And often people had their pets with them, or I was doing groups of kids because people wanted portraits. I did like a set of triplets, I think, and a set of twins. In the area I lived, there were lots of multiple beds for some reason. But yeah, I just basically didn't think about it too much. I just was like, I've got a set of watercolours, I've got some fine line pens, I've got my pencils to do an initial sketch. I'm just going to do it and see how quickly I can do it. And I was managing to do those in about 15 minutes, for head and shoulders sketch. I can now do them in about 5 to 10 minutes, having practiced a lot since then. But yeah, that was the first time I did it, and I really just got the bug for it. I was like, this is so much fun. And then I just started researching live illustration as a thing. Realised there's a lot of people out there doing it. It's very popular for weddings at the moment. And you know, the sheer number of weddings and events that happen day in, day out, there's plenty of work out there, I think, if you wanted to explore that industry, particularly because it involves you physically being there. So ultimately, no one person can be everywhere. So most live illustrators tend to sort of work in the area they're based. So there's other illustrators I found that are based in Norfolk, which is nowhere near me, or another one that's based in Ireland. So they're not competitors to me because they're in their areas and they're really well known for what they do there. But I found that there wasn't a huge amount of people doing it where I live in Berkshire, and this part of the UK. So that made me realise there was an opportunity for me to start doing that type of work. So then I started pitching to wedding venues and doing wedding fairs, just sharing my work online, explaining what I do, putting together packages. And I realised with weddings it was more fun to do like a full-length fashion portrait almost, which kind of took me back full circle.
Because people dress up, right? They put a beautiful outfit on. They want that in
exactly.
That. Yeah.
So I mean, at the art fair, people weren't as dressed up, so head and shoulders portraits are better. But at weddings, you absolutely want to capture the fantastic outfits that people are wearing, and you've got a lovely glass of champagne in their hand, and you know everyone's smiling and happy. that's the style that I paint in, is everyone has a smile. I make everyone look lovely, and I give everyone a smile when I paint them. So it captures that moment really well.
I think there's something about weddings that is very different from like business conferences or something where everyone is like, oh, do I have to be here? Like people like being at a wedding and having a good time. At least that's what people, the atmosphere.
I also do like sort of award ceremonies and sort of formal events like that. Where, again, people will be a bit more dressed up and have be in their glad rags. So and it's just lovely because people everyone's used to having their photo taken when they're dressed up like that, but having your portrait painted, it's so wonderful getting people's reaction to that experience and seeing how they were like, oh, I do look fantastic, and like it just because it captures them in a lovely way, in a totally different way that they hadn't expected. And it's a wonderful memory. Usually people come to weddings in couples, so they've got a lovely portrait of them together. It's totally unique. It's really special.
Oh, very nice. And sort of in the big scheme of things, you've not actually done this for a really long time. And how do you find it to sort of make a living from your art? You find it?
I would say like the biggest thing that's changed for me is doing the live events and doing things like weddings. So when I started running my business in 2020, obviously in the middle of all the lockdown, so it was a fully online business, and I was mainly selling products and illustrated gifts and cards. And although that was a good time for online businesses, it was when lots of people were shopping online and there was more opportunity. Like one of my sisters actually has her own business making clothing, and she had a fantastic time in that period because she did really well and had a lot of interest from people commissioning her to make custom clothing, etc. But I found it quite frustrating to only be online. And also I just found it frustrating to only rely on sales of products, which in themselves were low value individually, so you have to sell an awful lot of them.
Yeah, you have to sell a lot of cards to pay your rent.
So that's why this time last year I decided to explore a totally different area of illustration, which was the live event. So I explored it this previous year to a certain extent, but mainly had sort of been laying the foundations for how it would work, and practicing and knowing that I could draw quickly, and building my portfolio. And so by this time last year, I was like, I think I'm ready. I've got my packages. I've done a few wedding fairs. I've started booking in weddings. And so that's kind of was my big focus last year, plus teaching workshops and working with a range of different venues, which some worked, some didn't. Some venues were not as good at helping me promote the workshops. Others were fantastic at it. And so I found some really good local businesses I wanted to work with, and collaborators. And then, so that the switch to those types of income have made a huge difference. And now, and also, I also work part-time 2 days a week as an awards coordinator at the World Illustration Awards and at the Association of Illustrators. So doing that alongside my other work has helped it all balance out. And I would say if anyone's starting out, do make sure you've got some sort of at least part-time income just to keep things ticking over as you build things up. I think it's a lot to just jump into it full-time straight away. I think it makes total sense to build it up gradually and then have that sort of buffer of income when you are not sure what your freelance income will be.
I think that's really good advice because there's nothing wrong with, having a bit of security in the background, because it also frees you up creatively. If you feel like you can take a bit more risks sort of creatively, I think that can make a really big difference to people.
Exactly. Yeah. I think having endless time to create is not necessarily a good thing. Having limited time to create is better because you have to carve that time out, especially, and it's more precious. And also, like, restricting the time that you give yourself to create can help as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, like, there's nothing wrong with selling postcards or like anything like that. But I think if you do like prints and cards to make a full-time living of it, you basically have to have a web shop and approach shops for wholesale, and you really need to enjoy that running a shop part of things. I discovered
Yes.
quite early on that I did not enjoy it. I find it very stressful to package things and send them off and then hope that everything goes well, and then there's a strike at the mail and then does everything, all of these things. I find it really super stressful.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's people who make brilliant living out of that and who really enjoy it. So I think it really is
Yeah.
about finding the sort of niche that you want to learn. Then again, I also know a lot of illustrators who be terrified drawing something while people are watching them. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's just finding what makes sense. I think when I started out, I felt like I should be doing certain things as an illustrator, and there were certain types of illustration I should be doing because that's what I saw other people doing, I guess. But then, and also I was trying to do so many different things. I also explored surface pattern design, so looking into licensing for print design and things like that. But that was a whole other part of the industry that also takes a huge amount of time, same as running a shop. And I just realized, actually, just maybe think about 2 or 3 things that I really, really enjoy and put my energy into those and just focus on those. And that has been the best thing I've done, is to really narrow down to the things I enjoy the most, and just focusing on them and refining those as best as I can. That has made a huge difference to just how I run my business, how it stopped me feeling as overwhelmed, because I know I've got 2 or 3 things I'm focusing on day to day, and it's more realistic to be able to manage that alongside the fact I do work have another job alongside this. Yeah, exactly. I think that, but it takes time. I think it is definitely worth experimenting when you first start out to see what you enjoy. And not to discount anything, because you never know what might really spark your imagination.
Yeah, don't pigeonhole too early, but then at the same time, it's good to have a little bit of focus. Yeah, a bit of a balance between those two, I think, is best. And I saw, or I know that you are also looking into setting up some online courses or like some online workshops.
I'm starting to look into that. I think I haven't had the time to organise that yet, but the main thing I've been actually focusing on outside of my normal workshops. So my workshops usually are in the evenings, occasionally on weekends for like 2 to 3 hours with one theme, one subject. But I've decided this year I really want to start hosting retreats or creative retreats in collaboration with other businesses. So this year in September, I will be hosting a retreat with my friend Jodie Rose, who's a calligrapher. And so we'll be doing a joint calligraphy and watercolour retreat in Berkshire, where we're based. We found an amazing venue in Berkshire that's really beautiful. It's perfect for the venue. It's also got accommodation on site if you're wanting to make a whole weekend of it. But we're going to do it as like a one-day, really packed creative retreat, including the watercolour workshops, the calligraphy workshops, food and drink for the day, and then we're also having a sort of mindful breathing workshop at the end of the day as well.
Lovely.
And we're going to be using flowers from the garden at the venue and things like that. So I think, yes, later on this year, I'm hoping to still launch some online classes. But at the moment, my focus has been planning the retreat later in the year. And we're hoping to launch the pre-sale tickets in mid-March. So you can currently sign up to the waiting list for that.
I think that sounds so much fun. It's a little bit of my dream as well to do like a retreat, or even if like something abroad, like like this beautiful place where people can come and make art for a weekend or something like that. It sounds like you have a lot of things going on as well. A lot of things happening.
So I've got, as I said, like the summer is normally much busier. I've got lots of weddings booked in the summer, and the workshops I'm doing this year sort of starting in the spring, and then we'll also be in the summer and autumn.
Mm.
And then the retreat in the autumn as well. And if that goes well, we'll try and do them seasonally. So one autumn one, a winter's one, a spring one, and a summer one, etc.
Are there things that you learned in your fashion degree that you still use now in your illustration business?
Well, it's the fashion illustration side of it. So yeah, I mean, that was the side I always enjoyed. But what I like now is the fact that I'm drawing real people, not fashion models. But I do still enjoy fashion illustration. I've been putting together like an idea for a workshop combining florals and fashion illustration. That I'm trying to find the right venue because it's a little bit out there as a subject. I think sometimes people just want to know how to paint flowers, but I do think fashion illustration can be really fun and not too intimidating. I think some people think it's like only something that people in the fashion industry would want to do or know how to do, but I found the fashion industry a little bit frustrating when I tried to work in it after my degree. So I want to create hopefully fashion illustration classes that are more accessible and fun for anyone.
Well, also for people who enjoy fashion but not necessarily want to work in the industry. But,
yeah, exactly. I think it can be a bit of an elitist industry, and you have to sort of look and act a certain way to succeed in that industry. So yeah, that's the frustration I had with it at the time. Also, it's the sustainability angle. Like, I do make my own clothes still from the skills I learned in my degree, and I don't really take commissions because making clothes is very time consuming and expensive. But as I said, my sister does have her own business making clothing, but she makes kind of kids and maternity clothing mainly. I have now started making kids' clothes, which is really fun because it's a lot smaller and you can complete the project a lot quicker. So yeah, I just kind of I like sort of upcycling garments and taking old bed sheets and textiles you find in charity shops and turning that into things as well. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
I love doing that, but I have a sewing machine and I like knitting and I like working with fabrics and making things, but I am really not precise. So whenever I'm sewing something, I always end up with one sleeve much longer than the other, so it's not something I could ever pursue, professionally. But
that's the challenge. Is it does involve precision and patience as well. Like particularly if I haven't sewn for quite some time, I kind of forget how long it can take to get something right, and you just have to keep persisting, keep going.
My mum knits, and she knits these beautiful jumpers, but when she makes a mistake, she just easily takes out half a jumper if she notices it late, and then starts again. Like she's really precise, and I'll be like, oh, no one will notice that. Leave it in, it's fine.
I have started. I've been knitting a snood for like the whole of the winter. It might be finished in time for spring, I think. I'm extremely slow as a knitter, but I kind of do it more for just the mindfulness of it because it's just really simple, and it's something that doesn't involve looking at a screen. You're just still using your hands and stuff. So very, very slowly knitting, but that's kind of my limit.
It's okay it's okay if it takes a long time. Not everything has to be fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the nice thing about knitting. Usually, is it's like slow fashion, slow crafts, and that's the joy of it.
Nice. How are you getting on with the sketching and talking at the same time? Because I know it's. I think
you've gone a lot further than me. I've just been doing some outlines of plants and things. Haven't added colour yet. Yeah, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I'm very fast though. I'm aware of that. I'm always very fast.
Yeah, I think it's. I do chat to people whilst I'm doing live portraits and things, but you're clearly very practiced at having a full-on conversation and doing a full-on sketch at the same time. I think. And obviously it's the first time we've spoken properly, so it's nice to get to know you properly.
It really is. Yeah. What sort of I forgot what I wanted to ask you. Is there something that you want to add? Is there something that I forgot?
Were you asking if I was from a creative family? One of the questions.
Yeah.
So my parents are, well, they're both retired now, but they're a doctor and nurse. But my dad's very musical. He plays the piano, he sings, he plays the organ. And my mum paints and is an amazing cook as well. I'm actually taking a print course with my mum soon, which should be really fun because I haven't done printing in years and always wanted to explore it. So we're taking a course down at somewhere called Hand Printed UK in Bognor, which looks really fun. It's with like quite a well-known textile artist designer. And yeah, as I said, my sisters are both very creative. So my sister she's one of those people that literally seems to be able to do anything. She did her degree in music. She qualified as a primary school teacher, became a professional music teacher, and now has her own business making clothing. But she also now has taught herself, she's become a baby sign language teacher as well. So she's very, very entrepreneurial and very creative. And my other sister did a fine art degree and studied sculpture and makes these beautiful wicker and wooden sculptures. But she also teaches herself how to make a yurt from scratch. So she makes fancy dress costumes for her little boy. And she's really lovely. She's really good at sketching and painting as well. Yeah, so as a family, we are pretty creative. There's always lots of things happening. And we all and we're very practical as well. We all it's all hands on deck when it comes to family gatherings, and we all cook and food. So that's well, my sister's a singer as well, so musical and creative in lots of different ways.
So I really believe that everyone is creative, and that everyone, like, a lot of creative skills are literally that, skills. Like, I think everyone can learn to draw, everyone can learn to make a painting, and maybe not all to the same level. You have like a certain amount of talent or like natural sort of abilities, but everyone can learn certain skills. But a big part of it is also just bravery and trying things out and taking those first steps. So I think we have a family where everyone creates things, it becomes much easier to try out something new or to think, okay, I might.
That's true, yeah. But creativity isn't just about, it's not just about making art as such. I mean, you can be creative when you're cooking food, you can be creative as a scientist, like when you have to think about ideas and solutions. I think there's a quote I heard from Einstein the other day on creativity, which was, creativity is seeing what everyone else has seen and thinking what no one else has thought. But he said that as a scientist, obviously, and I think it does apply to so many things, I guess.
Yeah.
It's,
he also said that imagination is more important than knowledge.
Yes.
That was a really lovely quote as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because the things that he discovered would have come from him thinking with his imagination. Like, if you entirely bog yourself down in facts, then you don't leave any room for new information and imagination. So I think people always imagine that being creative means that they have to know how to draw, they know how to make something, but it can
those are the specific skills that people focus on, but it's much more than that.
Yeah, exactly. Like my husband isn't he doesn't draw or paint, but he loves music, and he's a DJ, and he also is very good at writing. So he's like, can't imagine doing what I do for my job. His day job is completely different, but he's equally very creative in a completely different way that I couldn't necessarily be able to do, because his brain works differently and thinks differently. Everyone's brain has an interesting perspective on the world, so
absolutely,
way of looking at it.
And I think that's also a really nice sort of segue into like different art styles as well, because sometimes people feel like they have to make something because someone else is successful in a specific style, but there's space for everyone, and you can have your own unique voice and your own unique style. You don't have to worry about creating something that looks like
in illustration, particularly because I work at the Association of Illustrators, and I look after the World Illustration Awards. We have like 10 categories of illustration, And the AOI, the Association of Illustrators, also do lots of different courses on how to explore different parts of illustration. Because some people might go into illustration thinking, I just want to be a children's book illustrator. I'm not interested in editorial illustration or mural design or anything else. And actually, it makes sense to try different types of illustration as well as different types of art. So you might enjoy drawing, but have you explored ceramics? Have you explored
embroidery,
sewing and textiles, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I think that again is a really nice sort of maybe for like an ending question. Like, if you would give any advice to people who are new to illustration or who might want to start drawing, or like who really are in the beginning of that journey, what would your advice be for people who are really new?
I would say just make a lot of bad art, make a lot of pretty rubbish. Like, don't be precious about what you're making. I don't make perfect art every day. I don't love every single thing that I draw. And I didn't, when I look back at the art I made when I first started out, I would not really want to share it with the world now. But it got me started and it got me somewhere. So you may not be happy with the art you're making now, but unless you keep making art and you keep creating something somehow, somewhere, when you have the chance, when you have the materials available, just do it anyway, and you will keep getting better. No, I don't think there's any artist out there that just is brilliant what they do off the bat with no preparation. Every artist is always learning, always evolving.
And even if you are, like, even people who sort of, wake up like Picasso and they're 3 years old and they make these beautiful landscapes or something, your taste changes.
Some of those,
Yeah, but your own taste and your own style changes. So something that you create now is probably not going to be something that you want to create in 3 years' time. So even to completely let go of that idea that something that you like now, that you will like that forever, that's not true. So you just need to embrace that process and know that you're going to learn for the rest of your life. Because
exactly,
even if it is perfect, you're going to look at it and think, oh, I want to make something different now. So
be open to that. Just be open to the fact that your style will keep changing. You'll be inspired by new things every day.
Yeah, you change as a person.
And it will depend on. I'm sorry.
You change as a person. You develop.
And you as a person, exactly. Like the person I was when I graduated is very different to the person I am now, and that's why the art I'm creating has changed. So. And the sort of trends in art and illustration will always keep evolving. Be inspired by different things as you carry on through your career.
Also, the other way around as well. Sometimes I look back on art that I hated at the time, and now I think, oh, I actually really like it. Why was I so unhappy with this 3 years ago or 4 years ago? Because you take more distance from what you make. I think after a few years, you look at it differently.
Something I like doing sometimes actually is, or something that if you're not sure where to start with making some drawing, I go back to old sketchbooks that I don't look at anymore and I add back into them. So they might just be a quick sketch I did one day and I add some extra colour, or I add in a different material, or I kind of turn it into something else. And even though you maybe drew it 5 years ago as something quite boring, it becomes a completely different drawing once you add colour or once you add other details to it.
I really like that idea. I've never done that. I always, I very rarely go back to old drawings, and I've never opened an old sketchbook and added anything to it. So I might try that. I've always sort of felt like once it's full, like new one, and then
I think it depends. I mean, obviously, you fill your sketchbooks with quite a lot of detail. I was going back and finding
not always,
in the gallery. So but if it's just like a quick pen sketch or a pencil sketch, and you didn't have time to finish it, and then you kind of like, oh, it didn't really look how I wanted it to, so you move on. But then you can go back and be like, well, it could be this instead, or it could add this colour to it to change it. Also, a nice one I do as well sometimes is just painting blobs on a page and then turning the blobs into something. So they can become anything. I saw someone on Instagram today that turned a load of blobs into angry cats. That was quite fun. They just put angry cat faces on all the blobs, and it looked really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, blobs are a good one to just. If you're scared of a blank page, paint a load of colourful blobs all over it and see what you can turn it into.
Well, this is something like when you say I fill my page with quite a lot of detail. This is something I do now, but this is not how I started. If I look back at sketchbooks from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I was really scared to add anything to the page, and like I might make like a portrait and I was not happy with it, and then I just leave it for 5 months because I didn't want to use that sketchbook for anything else because I was so in my head. So I think the more you practice, the more you can let go of them. That's definitely something that happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. I also like doing things like life drawing classes are really good for being fully free.
Having a timer.
Because you don't have the time to think, and you have to work very big as well normally. So, and really with messy materials that you can't be precious about. Stuff like that really helps. But it's just to keep going and keep creating, and you will see your style evolve. It's that whole thing of people like, oh, I need to find my style, but you won't find it unless you're willing to make bad art and stuff that you don't necessarily like straight away.
Finding your style is not finding someone else's style and then copying that and then deciding that's your style. That's not how it works, because you're not going to enjoy that for a long time. You might enjoy it for a short, as a learning curve, but because your style is something that you already have within you. And sometimes people are too hung up on style as well, I think, because sometimes someone, like, I don't really think I have an art style, but sometimes people who I don't know, they say to me, oh, well, your art looks similar and I can recognize it, but I just think I use lots of different materials and I have lots of fun. And
I think that's the thing. I think that's most artists themselves, unless they're very established and very, there are certain artists that do have a very established style, but a lot of artists are like, I'm the same. I think sometimes I look at all the different art I create, and to me it looks very different. But
also sometimes you think someone has one style because that's what they share on an Instagram account, for example, but maybe in the background they experiment with lots of other things that you don't see and that they don't share.
Exactly. And I think, and that's the other thing, like a lot of people these days feel compelled to share their art all the time, and you don't have to. You can share what you want to share. I think it's good to create art that you don't always share, and it is just for you to play with and experiment with.
And also I think something that really comes forward from your story is that you don't need to be like, it's not only social media that people use to get work, because sometimes I think people are starting out, they feel they need to have a big social media presence in order to find work, but there's lots of other ways you can go about it, like by approaching companies yourself, or like you said, venues, or going to fairs, or there's lots of other ways of going about it.
I would say the majority of the work I get is actually from pitching directly to the clients and people I want to work with. So whether sometimes that involves a DM on Instagram and chatting to someone you've been following, and you're saying, oh, I love your work, or I think we could work together, and starting a conversation that way. But if it's someone that you've never met, then you can find them on LinkedIn and connect with them there and find out who they are, where they work, what they do, and figure out how to get in contact with them through their company website, etc., like doing some research. Or again, coming back to the AOI, they also have these directories that you can get, which is a list of people in advertising, publishing, and editorial illustration. And there's a big list of people that you can then contact and say, oh, this is my portfolio, this is what I do, I'd love to work with you. But I find 80 to 90% of the time that approach gets me way more exciting opportunities than just posting things on Instagram. I do think Instagram or social media is useful. It's kind of like a shop window of what you do. And it's
don't
a
discount
mini portfolio. So people will still go there to see what you're about and have a quick look. But do definitely take time to make your website great, improve your SEO. And aside from either emailing people directly, also just physically talking to people, building a network. In lots of, whether that's being a podcast guest or, at the workshop venues that I work with, I do other collaborations with them for other events that they do, because once I get to know them, they can either recommend someone they think I could work with, or they have a project that we could work on. So yeah, just kind of physically putting yourself out there is as important as putting yourself out there online, I would say.
Yeah, and your own personal network as well, because I get quite a lot of work from just talking to people, like face to face, either because I go to an event, but I also, like, for example, once I was waiting for the Eurostar to take the train to the Netherlands, and I started to talk to this elderly gentleman next to me, and he was really lovely, and it turned out he was a chef, and he just wrote a book, and then he's like, oh, I actually need some illustrations, and then one thing led to the other, and I got to do some illustrations for him. And it was completely random, like not, like sometimes just talking to people, like just as a human being, you talk to other people and tell them what you do, and you never know, what they refer to you or,
or where they work and how you can support them in what they do. Because I think, particularly for illustration, there's so many places you can apply illustration. I think people maybe just think it's in magazines or children's books, but having worked in the job I do now, like, I realise there's so many places that you can apply illustration, and so many types of businesses that could benefit from it in lots of different ways. Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good sort of place to end. Would you mind just saying your website one more time and your social media handles, and I will make sure I put everything in the show notes so that people can find you.
Yeah. So my website is helenridley.com, and you can find out about my live illustration work, my workshops, my portfolio, have a chat about what you'd like to work with me on. And then on Instagram, I'm Helen Ridley Illustration, and I'm the same on Facebook. You can find me under Helen Ridley Illustration on LinkedIn as well. So Helen Ridley Illustration, pop that into Google and you should find me in lots of different places.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. I really love talking to you, and I feel like we could carry on talking for another 3 hours about all these things and just draw. Maybe we should meet up some point soon and just do drawing and chatting, and I feel like we can spend the whole day just sketchbooking together. So thank you so much for being a guest. And
thank you for having me. It's been fantastic. It's been lovely to draw together. I love that aspect of this podcast. It's really nice seeing your creations come to life in front of me as well.